Okay, so last time we were exploring Plato's cave, right? That whole idea about being stuck seeing shadows and thinking they're the real deal.
Yeah. Powerful imagery.
Totally. And I love that Plato doesn't just like leave us there.
Right.
He actually gives us like a way out, a way to get to real knowledge. And he even throws in a surfing metaphor. Because who doesn't love a good wave, right?
Well, and that's one of the things I find so interesting about Plato is that he's not just, philosophizing.
Right.
He's giving us tools, methods for actually seeking truth, not just sitting back and observing.
Yeah. Okay, so first up, we've got this thing called Plato's Metaphysical Elevator.
Okay.
And I don't know why, but I'm picturing like one of those old-timey elevators with the wrought iron gates and like a very slow operator.
Not quite.
Okay.
Think of it more like each floor is a different level of reality.
Exactly.
Starting with like our everyday senses at the bottom,
Yeah.
what we see, touch, taste, all those basic building blocks.
So like the ground floor of Reality Tower.
Yeah.
And we're just getting bombarded with sights, sounds, maybe some pizza smells wafting in.
Yeah, precisely. But as you go up, you start to leave behind those immediate senses.
Right.
And your mind focuses on, less tangible things like concepts, ideas, underlying principles.
So it's like if the lobby's all pizza and traffic,
Yeah.
the higher floors are more like a quiet library where you can actually like concentrate.
That's a great analogy. And then at the very top,
Okay.
the penthouse suite of knowledge.
Okay.
That's where Plato puts the forms.
Ooh, forms.
Yeah. These are like the pure, unchanging essence of things.
Okay.
The eternal blueprints, if you will,
Right.
that exist beyond our world of appearances.
Okay, I gotta admit, forms sounds a little intimidating. Like, what even is the pure essence of a chair? Is there like a cosmic chair floating around out there somewhere?
It is a tricky concept, but think of it like this. The chair you're sitting on right now, that's just one chair.
Right.
It might break, it might get old, it might go out of style, but the idea of a chair, the essential qualities that make it a chair, those stay the same.
So like, my specific chair is like a shadow on the cave wall.
Yes.
But the form of chair is like the real deal outside the cave.
You got it. And for Plato, understanding those forms, those underlying truths, that's the ultimate goal of knowledge. It's about, getting to the heart of what things really are.
Okay, but here's the thing I'm picking up on. This elevator, it's not just about going up. It's about letting go of stuff, too. What's the deal with that? Is there, like, a weight limit on truth?
Yes. It's like Plato's reminding us that to get to those higher levels, we've got to, lighten our load.
Right.
Ditch the mental baggage that's weighing us down.
So ditch the assumptions, the biases, all that stuff we cling to without even realizing it.
Exactly. All those preconceived notions, those unexamined beliefs can keep us stuck on the lower floors. One of the sources I was looking at even uses this funny image, like someone trying to cram a giant inflatable duck onto the elevator.
Oh, no.
It's hilarious, but it makes the point.
Less duck, more focus. Okay, I get it.
Right.
But how do we even know we're getting closer to truth on this elevator ride? What if we end up on the wrong floor? Like, we think we found the penthouse, but it's actually just, the laundry room of bogus beliefs.
That is the crucial question.
Right.
And that's where Plato's, what's called his powers argument comes in. It gets to the core of how we tell the difference between, just believing something and actually knowing it.
So it's not just about feeling super, super confident about something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday versus I know it's Tuesday.
It's more than that. For Plato, knowledge and opinion, they aren't just different degrees of certainty. They have different powers.
Okay.
They're directed at different things.
Okay.
And they have different capacities for being right or wrong.
I'm intrigued. Walk me through this. What's the difference in their powers?
All right. So think of it this way. Opinion is tied to the world of unwarrances.
Okay.
The stuff that's always changing, shifting, like those shadows on the cave wall, right?
Oh.
It's like trying to surf on a wave that keeps, changing and disappearing.
Yay.
You never quite get stable, never totally sure.
So opinion is shaky, unreliable, always subject to change.
Yeah. Whereas knowledge is more...
More the ocean floor.
Yes.
Solid, unchanging.
Fantastic analogy.
Okay.
Knowledge, for Plato, is grounded in those forms we were talking about, the unchanging, eternal truths that are beyond, just how things appear.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the difference here.
Okay.
So opinion is like relying on your friend who's pretty sure they know the way.
Right.
While knowledge is like having a super reliable GPS that's like locked onto the coordinates of truth.
That's it. And because knowledge is based on these unchanging forms, Plato says it has this special power.
Okay.
The power to be, like, inherently right.
Wait, so true knowledge can never be wrong. It's infallible.
You got it. That's key for Plato.
Wow, that's a bold claim. But how do we, like mere mortals, actually get to that level? Is there a secret handshake? A hidden button on the elevator panel?
You're right. It's not easy. Remember that metaphysical elevator?
Yeah.
Reaching the top floors takes effort, focus, willingness to let go of the things holding us back.
Right. Like that giant inflatable duck.
Exactly.
Okay.
No shortcuts to wisdom.
All right.
Not if we're aiming for the kind of knowledge Plato's talking about.
Right.
It's a process, a journey of constantly refining our understanding, pushing past those initial opinions and trying to get to something deeper and more enduring.
Yeah, and I'm guessing there are probably a few wrong turns along the way, right? Maybe even accidentally hit the door close button and get sent back down a few floors.
Oh, absolutely. Even with the best intentions.
Yeah.
We can make mistakes, cling to false beliefs, or get stuck at a certain level. One of the sources described it as like an awkward elevator ride, which I think is perfect.
Awkward, huh?
Yeah.
What makes it awkward?
Well, remember, this journey, it's not always like smooth and linear.
Right.
Sometimes we think we're heading in the right direction only to realize, ooh, got to reevaluate, maybe even go back down a few floors.
Right.
Or, you get stuck making small talk with someone who has a totally different understanding of reality.
Oh.
And that can lead to some philosophical friction.
Oh, man, I've been on those elevator rides where the philosophical debates just go nowhere.
Yes.
So awkward.
Exactly. But even those, seemingly unproductive encounters,
Right.
they can be valuable. They force us to look at our own assumptions and consider different perspectives, even if it's a bit uncomfortable.
So it's not just what we know, but how we think.
Yeah.
Like the process is just as important as where we end up.
Precisely. Plato is emphasizing this importance of critical thinking, constantly questioning, refining our understanding. It's less about, that final answer and more about this ongoing dialogue with ourselves, with the world around us.
So it's not like a straight shot to the top.
Yeah.
It's more like a game of chutes and ladders with turns, setbacks, But hopefully with enough persistence and maybe a lucky roll of the dice,
right,
we eventually climb our way to a more solid understanding of things.
That's a great way to put it. There are setbacks.
Right.
Moments of doubt.
Yeah.
Times we might slide backward.
Yeah.
But for Plato, even that process, that striving for knowledge, that self-examination, it's valuable in itself.
So it's not just about the destination. It's about the journey itself.
Yes.
And maybe even like enjoying the view from the elevator as we go up.
Exactly. Because in the end, maybe true wisdom isn't about having all the answers, but about being willing to ask the right questions.
Ooh, I like that.
And that willingness to question, to explore, to embrace the unknown, that's what pushes us forward.
So we're not just passengers on this metaphysical elevator.
Right, yeah.
We're the operators, choosing which buttons to push and which floors to explore.
Precisely. And that's what's exciting about it. We have the power to shape our own understanding, to go beyond the shadows and into the light of true knowledge.
That's pretty inspiring. But I gotta be honest, I'm still a little fuzzy on this whole forms thing.
Yeah.
It sounds like a really big deal to Plato, but how do we actually grasp these eternal blueprints? Like, do we need special philosophical X-ray vision or something?
It's definitely a challenging concept,
Yeah.
one that philosophers have been, wrestling with for centuries.
You're right.
But maybe we can try to shed some light on it by looking at a specific example. Let's stick with the chair.
Okay, back to the chair. I'm game.
All right, so picture all the different chairs in the world, right? You've got kitchen chairs, your fancy office chairs, your comfy armchairs,
Yeah.
maybe even like a beanbag chair or two thrown in there.
You're making me want to go chair shopping.
But despite all those differences, there's something that unites them all. Something that lets us recognize each one as a chair, even if we've never seen that specific type before.
Right. They all have like a seat, some kind of back support, maybe some legs.
Yeah.
Even if those legs are like hidden or super funky looking.
Exactly. And for Plato, those essential qualities, those shared characteristics, those are part of the form of chair.
Okay.
It's like a blueprint that exists in this realm of like perfect, unchanging ideas.
So it's not a physical chair floating around somewhere. It's more like a concept,
Yeah,
a set of features that all chairs share.
you got it. And this applies to all sorts of things, not just chairs. There's the form of beauty, the form of justice, even the form of triangle.
Wait, a triangle? That's just a shape.
Well, sure, we can draw triangles,
Right.
but those are just, imperfect representations of the true form of triangle,
Okay.
which exists in that realm of pure ideas. Think about it. A perfect triangle has, like, perfectly straight sides, perfectly equal angles.
And no matter how hard we try, we can never draw a perfectly perfect triangle in real life.
Exactly. The ones we draw are like the shadows.
Right.
And the true form is the real deal outside the cave. It's the perfect blueprint, the one that all those imperfect triangles are trying to, like, imitate.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So these forms are like the ultimate ideals, the perfect versions of things that exist beyond our everyday experience.
Precisely. And for Plato, grasping these forms, that's the key to true knowledge.
Okay.
It's about moving beyond just our senses and accessing these, like, eternal, unchanging truths.
So how do we do that? How do we access these forms if they're beyond our senses? Do we need to, like, meditate on a mountaintop or something?
It's a great question, and it's something, we'll dig into more.
Okay.
And I think one key takeaway here is that for Plato, true knowledge isn't just about, like, gathering facts or information.
No.
It's about cultivating a certain way of thinking, a way of seeing past those shadows and getting to the essence of things.
So it's not just about what we know, but how we know it.
Exactly. It's about, having that mindset of curiosity, critical thinking, and being willing to, challenge our own assumptions.
Okay.
It's about constantly trying to refine our understanding and move closer to those eternal truths, even if we never quite, completely reach them.
Sounds like a lifelong journey.
It is, but it's a journey worth taking. Because for Plato, pursuing knowledge is ultimately about living a more meaningful life.
Right.
A life grounded in truth and understanding, not just illusions and fleeting opinions.
On that note, I think we need to let our listeners maybe take a minute and let all this wisdom sink in.
Right.
We'll be back soon to keep exploring Plato's world.
So before we took a moment there,
Right.
we were talking about how true knowledge for Plato involves getting a handle on these eternal forms, those like perfect blueprints that exist beyond what we usually experience.
Right. Like that perfect triangle we talked about.
Yeah.
The one you can never actually draw.
Exactly. But, this brings up another question.
Okay.
If those forms are beyond our senses, how do we even, like, get to them? It's like he's saying, hey, there's this amazing penthouse suite of knowledge.
Right.
But good luck finding the key.
He's not exactly giving us a map to this truth-seeking territory, is he?
Not a conventional one, no.
Right.
But he does offer some clues,
Okay.
some methods to guide us. One of the big ones is something called dialectic.
Dialectic. Okay, got to be honest, that sounds a little intimidating.
Yeah.
Any way to put that a little more simply?
Basically, it's a process of reasoned discussion and questioning, like having thoughtful conversations,
Right.
challenging assumptions, and trying to refine our understanding.
It's kind of like what we're doing right now.
Exactly. But for Plato, it was more than just, casual chatting. It was a rigorous method for uncovering truth,
Right.
like peeling back all the layers of opinion to get closer to those forms.
So not just shooting the breeze, but using questions and reasoning to go deeper.
Yeah. It's like, intellectual sparring.
Okay.
You test your ideas against someone else's,
Right.
looking for inconsistencies, contradictions, areas where, maybe your understanding is flawed.
Like a mental workout. We're
Yeah.
flexing those critical thinking muscles.
I love that analogy. And just like a workout,
Right.
It can be tough.
Yeah.
Even uncomfortable at times.
Right.
It forces us to confront our biases, to be open to the possibility that we're wrong, and to constantly be refining what we think based on, new info and new perspectives.
That sounds pretty humbling. No room for egos in the truth-seeking game, huh?
Not if you're really serious about those forms, no. Plato believed true knowledge takes a certain amount of humility,
Okay.
a willingness to admit we don't have all the answers,
Right.
and that what we think we know is always, like, evolving.
It makes me think of that quote about the unexamined life
Yes.
not being worth living.
It seems like Plato is really pushing us to constantly look at what we believe, question our assumptions, and never stop learning.
Exactly. This wasn't just an intellectual hobby for him.
Right.
It was a way of life, a path to a more virtuous and fulfilling existence.
So not just filling our heads with facts, but developing a certain kind of, like, character.
Yeah, a way of being in the world that's rooted in truth and wisdom.
Precisely. He's talking about those intellectual virtues, those
Yeah.
habits of mind
Yeah.
that let us see the world more clearly, make better choices, and live better with ourselves and others. Okay, that all makes sense. But I'm still kind of hung up on this idea of knowledge being like infallible. How can we be totally sure of anything, especially when the world seems so complicated and always changing?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets right to the heart of one of Plato's toughest ideas. Remember, for him, true knowledge is all about those forms.
Right. The cosmic share, perfect triangle, all that.
Yes. And because those forms are eternal, never changing.
Yeah. The knowledge we get from them also has this very specific kind of certainty.
Okay.
It doesn't go up and down like our opinions do,
Mm.
which are usually based on, limited stuff we've seen or how things look in the moment.
So if our knowledge is really based on those unchanging truths, it can't be swayed by, like, changing opinions or just what our senses tell us.
Precisely. It's like having solid ground to stand on,
Yeah.
even when everything else feels shaky.
Hmm.
Now, look, this doesn't mean we can't mess up
Right.
or that what we understand can't grow.
Right. Like that awkward elevator ride.
Exactly.
There are going to be wrong turns.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But even when we do make mistakes,
Yeah.
those mistakes don't erase the underlying truth of the forms themselves.
Right.
They stay constant, even if our understanding of them is, incomplete or a bit off.
Huh.
And that's why Plato's so big on that process of dialectic.
Right.
The constant questioning, refining, striving for a deeper understanding.
So it's not about reaching this, final state of perfect knowing.
Oh. It's more about that lifelong journey of, seeking truth.
That's a wonderful way to put it.
Okay.
It's about having that intellectual humility.
Right.
Realizing we're always learning, always growing, and always trying to get closer to those eternal truths.
Makes sense. But I gotta ask, how do we actually do that? Is it just endless philosophical debates?
Debates are definitely part of it,
Right.
but it goes deeper than that. Remember the elevator?
Yeah.
For Plato, reaching those higher levels, it wasn't just intellectual effort.
Okay.
It takes a certain kind of inner transformation too,
Mm-hmm.
a purification of the soul.
Whoa. Okay, now we're getting into some serious philosophy territory. Purification of the soul. What does that even mean?
Basically, it's about freeing ourselves from the things that make it hard to see clearly.
Okay.
Remember all that mental baggage, the biases, assumptions, beliefs we don't even think about? That stuff can weigh us down,
Right.
keep us stuck on the lower floors, so to speak.
Yeah.
So purifying the soul is like decluttering our minds,
Yeah.
getting rid of all the junk that blocks us from seeing those forms.
Exactly. It's about developing the virtues that let us see more clearly.
Okay.
Things like wisdom, courage, justice, temperance. Plato didn't think these were just abstract ideals. They were essential qualities of a
Right.
well-ordered soul, a soul that could, actually grasp those higher truths.
So it's not just about thinking the right thoughts, but being the right kind of person.
Precisely. For him, going after knowledge and going after virtue, they were completely connected.
Hmm.
He thought that by cultivating those inner qualities, we could become more receptive
Right.
to those eternal truths,
Yeah.
more able to see past the shadows, so to speak.
So it's not just about a sharp mind, it's about a good heart.
That's beautiful. I like that. And for Plato, this link between knowing and being good, it was essential.
Mm.
He believed that true knowledge, the kind based on those forms, naturally leads us to do the right thing, to live a life that, fits with those universal principles of goodness and truth.
So it's like that whole knowledge is power idea,
Yeah.
but the power is to live better,
Right.
not just win arguments or collect facts.
Fantastic insight. For Plato, true knowledge, it wasn't just about mastering ideas. It was about changing ourselves and the world around us. It was about getting our lives in sync with those eternal truths.
Yeah.
Living in a way that reflects, wisdom, justice, goodness.
Wow. That's a pretty inspiring way to look at things. But how do we actually do that? How do we cultivate those virtues, purify our souls to get to those higher truths?
That's a question Plato spends a lot of time on,
Right.
and one we could easily talk about for hours. But one key point is that it's a process, a journey
Yeah.
that takes intellectual effort and a commitment to living a good life.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all answer. It's more about embracing that continual process of self-discovery.
Exactly. It's about developing those habits in our minds and hearts that let us move closer to those eternal truths, even if we never completely arrive.
And maybe that journey, that striving for something more, maybe that's what really counts.
That's a beautiful thought.
Yeah.
And one I think Plato would absolutely agree with. For him, pursuing knowledge was never about getting to a final destination.
Right.
It was about that lifelong journey of searching for truth and living in a way that reflects those eternal values.
This is also fascinating.
Right.
But we've only just started to explore Plato's ideas. There's so much more.
Absolutely. His work is full of insights that are, still relevant today.
Yeah.
But maybe we can start wrapping things up
Okay.
by connecting this back to Plato's cave. Remember that.
Right. Being stuck in a world of shadows, mistaking illusions for reality.
Exactly. And everything we've talked about today, the
Right.
forms, dialectic, purifying the soul.
Yeah.
It's all about finding a way out of that cave and into the light of true understanding.
So it's like he's giving us tools to escape the cave.
Yes,
To see past those shadows and get to the real deal.
precisely. He's giving us ways to question our assumptions, refine what we know, and to get our lives in line with those eternal truths that are, beyond what we can just see or hear or touch.
And maybe, just maybe, if we really use those methods, if we keep seeking and striving,
Yeah.
we can finally break free from those chains and, step out into the sunlight of real knowledge.
That's a powerful image.
Yeah.
And I think it gets at the heart of Plato's message. It's hopeful. It reminds us that even though we might start out trapped in a world of shadows,
Right.
we have the power to break free and move towards a brighter, more truthful way of being.
That's a pretty inspiring thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while there's so much more to say, I think it's time for us to step out of this metaphorical cave and let our listeners, continue on their own journeys.
But before we go, I've got one more question. If Plato were here with us now, what do you think he'd say to our listeners who are, trying to navigate this world and find their own path to truth?
Oh, that's a good question. I think he'd encourage us to embrace those same virtues he talked about all those years ago.
Yeah.
Wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance.
Mm.
He'd remind us that seeking knowledge isn't just some intellectual exercise, it's how we live our lives, a path to a more meaningful existence.
Yeah.
He'd challenge us to question what we assume, have reasoned discussions, and never stop trying to understand ourselves and the world better.
Words to live by. Okay, well, I think it's time to wrap up. Plato really packs a punch with his ideas, huh?
He does, doesn't he? Makes you rethink things.
Totally. Gives you this whole new way of looking at the world, one that shows those, deeper truths, connections we might miss otherwise.
And that's the power of philosophy, right? It gets you to step out of your everyday thinking and really grapple with these big questions.
Yeah. Like hitting pause on autopilot and actually thinking about what it all means.
Exactly. And, that process, it can be tough.
Oh, yeah.
Even when it, leads you to some uncomfortable places or makes you question things you thought you knew for sure.
But in the end, it's about growth.
Yeah.
Becoming, more well-rounded people.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's why I think Plato's still so relevant.
Yeah.
He gets at something really basic about being human.
Yeah.
Our desire for knowledge, meaning connection to something bigger.
It's like we're all on this quest for truth, even if we don't always realize it. And Plato's giving us a guidebook for that journey.
And maybe a metaphysical surfboard too.
Love it. But even if we never fully grasp those forms
Right.
or reach that top floor of perfect knowledge, just the act of searching, of trying, that's what makes our lives richer, right?
Absolutely. And that's a journey we can all take. It doesn't matter where you are on your own path. It's about that curiosity, the love of learning, the willingness to, get out of your comfort zone and tackle those big questions.
So not about reaching some endpoint, but about that constant exploration and discovery.
Beautifully said. It's about becoming those lifelong learners, those truth seekers who are always open to new things, new perspectives, new insights, new ways of understanding.
And maybe along the way, we catch a glimpse of those forms.
Maybe so.
Those perfect blueprints that Plato thought were at the heart of everything.
Even if we don't, the journey itself changes us. It shapes us into more thoughtful, insightful people.
Well said. Well, I think it's time for us to step out of our metaphorical cave now and let our listeners keep exploring.
But before we go, I do want to leave everyone with one last thing to think about.
Ooh, I love a good cliffhanger. Lay it on me.
What if, for Plato, knowledge wasn't just about those unchanging forms, but about this constant process of refining what we know, that back and forth between our minds and the world?
So it's not a fixed destination. It's always being curious, always seeking.
Exactly. And maybe that's his most important lesson for us today.
Some serious food for thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Plato. And be sure to tune in next time for more adventures in knowledge.
Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep riding those waves of wisdom.